My name is Dan John Caterino. I'm the Education Services Manager at Jenkins Law Library here in Philadelphia, and I was scheduled to speak on the 30th of April at the GPLLA Legal Research course about secondary materials and free internet research. That class was canceled through no fault of anybody with regard to GPLLA, and I was asked to make a video so that we could insert this back into the class. The only problem is, I don't expect you to want to sit through an hour and a half video, which is the length of the class. So I'm going to try to distill this down to about 30 minutes if all goes well, and hit the high points of my presentation. Okay, the first part of my class was supposed to be, or is supposed to be, secondary materials. Okay, and I think before we even look at secondary materials, what's the difference between primary and secondary materials? Well, basically, what it comes down to is the agencies that you're dealing with, whether it's the judiciary or the legislature or the executive agencies, these branches of the government, they produce materials such as case law and statutes and regs. They're the primary legal materials. Okay, that's the stuff that actually gets produced by the government, if you will. The secondary materials are created by legal publishers to help you understand those primary materials, help you to search through them. They sometimes annotate them, whatever. Okay, secondary legal materials, there's a lot of them. Okay, and sometimes they're really nuanced. The differences between them are nuanced in that you don't always know what's one as opposed to the other. Let me just try to boil it down quickly for you. Treatises are probably the things you're going to run into the most, which are, volumes, books, whatever, written to explain areas of the law, and they'll have most important cases. They'll have the explanation of what the law's intent was. They'll actually have cases that have been tried to clarify the law, those kinds of things. So, as I say here in the slide, it's a detailed analysis. Some of these other secondary materials, you may or may not run into them. It depends on who you're doing the research for, what kind of case it is, and so forth. Another type of secondary source you may run into a fair amount of time are law review articles, and those are also quite useful in that they'll talk about recent stuff, but they'll also go back in time and highlight the important or seminal cases in a particular topic. So I can't possibly, and I don't really want to, explain all the little nuances between all the different types of secondary sources. Just as long as you get in your head that the secondary sources are produced by legal publishers to amplify what the primary legal materials were trying to achieve, that's probably all you need to know. And you're not going to find as many secondary materials for free on the web as you will the primary materials. Okay? And as we go through this class, as I said, trying to distill this into a half an hour, I'm going to try to balance between primary and secondary, but I will have more to say about primary, obviously, than secondary, since there's more of that available for free on the web. Okay, what I'm displaying here is the class materials for this class, and you should have received either an email or a link linking to this PDF, and I'm assuming you did. And if you scroll down this, I think there are 14 different websites that I listed that are available on the either for free or via subscription that would be of use to you in doing your legal research. I don't want to give you vertigo, but I'll scroll down. You can tell there's 7 pages here, a lot of stuff. There's no way I can cover all of these 14. I'm hoping to cover 5 of them throughout the course of this half-hour video, the top 5, if you will, the 5 that you should at least know about and know enough detail about that you can use them intelligently. And one of them is the FastCase app. I'm assuming that you may not be able to get access to FastCase, but you will be able to get access to the FastCase app. I'd also like to cover Google Scholar, a website called PublicResourceorg, which is interesting, and it does allow me to segue into more advanced Google searching. I'm going to talk about the Legal Information Institute, and I will finish up with Hein Online. Hein Online is not free, but it is an excellent resource, and it does have a wealth of secondary materials, and so I'd like to at least show you Hein in case you're able to get access to it, or if you have access to it, you'll be able to use it in more depth. So that is my table of contents, if you will, for what I hope to cover in this class today. Okay, the first website, or in this case it's an app, that I would like to talk about is Fastcase. Fastcase is both a website and an app. Fastcase is available generally to bar associations, and in the case of Jenkins Law Library, we have it for our members as well. It is an excellent source for case law searching and also for statutes browsing and searching. Rule of thumb for them, okay, is that for state cases they go back to the 1950s. For federal cases they go back to the 1920s. Now there's exceptions for each jurisdiction. Not every jurisdiction has the same coverage, but roughly speaking, rule of thumb, 50s to the present for state, 20s to the present for federal. And I'm not going to show you Fastcase via the desktop, because if you don't belong to a bar association or you don't have access to a large law library, you won't have access to Fastcase. But there is a free app that you can download for your iOS device. Okay, and here's the page from the iTunes store for Fastcase, and also on your Android device, and it gives you free access to their case law and statute libraries. Okay, it is really only going to require from you an email address to set up a registration. Okay, so it's free registration. You set up your account, and then you can access their libraries. It doesn't give you every feature that the desktop gives you. For example, they have things called Bad Law Bot, which will identify negative history for cases if those cases are cited the way the Blue Book wants you to cite them, where you say overturned, remanded, whatever. So it doesn't have Bad Law Bot. It doesn't have a graphical interface called timeline, interactive timeline, that lets you see your cases as little, I call them deviled eggs, but little circles that float up and down the a graph according to their relevance and their currency, how recent the case was. It doesn't have all of those neat bells and whistles, but it does give you access to the cases. So I figured, since I can't really plug an iPad in or an Android device and be able to record it easily, I am going to show you the screen caps that they provide. So this is the basic screen, straightforward. If you have an Android device, this looks pretty straightforward to you, and you have your limits ahead of time, that you can enter, or you can ignore them. The cases are pretty easy to look at. I have an Android phone. It's not one of the more recent, really huge ones that look like dinner plates, but I have a fairly big phone, and it worked quite well on it, even with my sausage fingers. And so it is an excellently designed app. No app is perfect, but this is not a bad app whatsoever. And it does allow you to look up cases when you're mobile, when you're on the run, when you're on the fly, as you're looking for cases or even statutes. So the first thing I would mention to you is, if you are intrigued by free case law and you're looking for alternatives to the big legal publishers like Lexis and Westlaw, Fastcase is definitely a site to check out. If you can't get access to it in the conventional method, which is the desktop method, then certainly you can download it to your device. Okay, all they'll need from you is an email address and a log. You create your login with your email address, and you can do case law and statute searching. So that's my first site that I wanted to talk to you. The first out of 5 is Fastcase. Desktop's great, has all the bells and whistles. The app has fewer, but it's still a solid app, well done, and it's it's a great source for case law. Okay, the second site that I'd like to talk to you about is Google Scholar. Okay, Google Scholar is a very much a mixed bag. There are journal articles from all of the disciplines, including law review articles in here. There's a searchable patent database going back to 1790. U.S. patent database, I should say. Google Book Search is included in Google Scholar, and there is also case law. Okay, their years of coverage for case law are very similar to those of Fastcase. In other words, 1950s to the present, generally speaking, for state case law, and 1920s to the present for federal case law. There is no page that tells you the coverage that they have for all of their individual moving parts, if you will, to Google Scholar. So that you really don't know, and they basically have said, hey, we're Google, we're really smart, trust us. Okay, so the only thing that I can say to you is, you gotta just go with a rule of thumb, which is the same as Fastcase: 50s to the present state, 20s to the present federal. And Google Scholar is a very flexible tool, and for I guess I'm speaking to people who are new-ish to the legal business, but if you were doing legal searching, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a date, 20 years ago, you would call up Lexis or Westlaw and say, give me the query, and they would give you this little guided missile query with all of the limits and all of the other things that you had to do, because it would just shoot right out there and get you the exact number of hits you were looking for, because everything costs money. connection time costs money, downloading, viewing, whatever. Everything costs money, so they would give you this really precise query so that you spent the least amount of time, and therefore money, getting your results. And for those of us that hail from back in the good old days like that, we're so focused on being real anal and having crafting, like hand crafting these wonderful queries. Now you don't got to be that way. You can be as loosey-goosey on the front end with your query, and you can clean it up on the back end. And for people who are newer to searching, this is maybe the only way that you've ever learned it. But I have had to actually unlearn a lot of the techniques that I got taught, because the new systems, the new tools, really don't need you to be very precise. Because everything's free, right? Everything on the internet is free for the most part. So what the heck is this man talking about? Well, let me show you. Okay, I've come into Google Scholar, and I will tell you what I want to do ahead of time. I want to find Pennsylvania cases, PA cases, that deal with ERISA. Okay, so I come into the Google Scholar box. It tells me it's going to search articles, including patents. I don't care what it does. ERISA, that's all I care about, my query. Okay, and I click the button, boom. Okay, now I've got a bunch of hits. So this is where I talk about being loosey-goosey on one end and cleaning up on the back end. I can say, well, I'm not really interested in articles. I'm interested in case law. And I apply that limit. And because it reads my IP address and knows where I'm located, it says, well, you know what, I think you're in PA, so are you interested in PA courts or the federal courts, or do you want another state's courts? Well, I said I wanted PA, so I just click on PA, and there you go. So with just a couple of clicks as limits, I've now got about 183 PA cases that deal with ERISA. Okay, so this is what I mean. You don't have to spend the time on the front end and clean up your query and make it like a little guided missile. You could just, with a couple of clicks, limit. And if I wanted to limit year ranges or whatever, I could do that as well, but I'm not going to go overboard with it. You get what I'm saying. Okay, one of the things that I really like about Google Scholar is that they have this cited by link. Okay, and the cited by link will pull up every document. Now, I didn't just say case. I said every document that Google knows about that cites the case that you're interested in. Okay, so if I click on cited by 161, there are 161 documents that Google knows about that cite Pappas v. Asbell. And these little lines indicate, let me see if it pops up with the bubble help. Yeah, the little lines indicate how much they discuss the cited case. The more lines, obviously, the better. The fewer lines, it says this one says discusses cited case briefly. This one says discusses cited case, and I don't have any freebies to show you, but it would be like, yeah, click here because it's going to really talk about your case. So really, basically, that's a nice little visual clue. Another thing that I wanted to point out about Google Scholar, which is really neat, is remember I said earlier Google Scholar is like a mixed bag? Well, that actually sometimes works to your advantage, because not only is it finding cases that cite the case you're interested in. I happen to know it's on page 8 here, so let me go down to page 8. It also includes things like journal articles, whether they are from other disciplines like healthcare, or they are law review articles, or even books. Okay, so it will pull up, this is a treatise, Stempel, on insurance contracts, and it cites Pappas v. Asbell. Okay, so you will be able to find not just cases, but you'll be able to find other secondary materials that you're interested in that cite the case that you are interested in. Now, if you run a Shepherd's report or a Keysight report on a case, you'll get a lot of these same types of materials. I'm not saying this is something that Keysight and Shepherd's don't do, but you know what? When you are, if the case is that important and you want to know anything that's ever cited it, this is Google Scholar is yet another tool that you could put in your toolbox to say, well, let me just run a quick Google Scholar search on this case and see if there's anything else that floats up that cites it that we're not aware of. Okay, again, since all this stuff is free, the only thing you're really spending is your time, to make sure that you have every possible citing document for the case that you're interested in. So, Google Scholar, let me go back to the results here. Google Scholar is an excellent resource for case law. Now, a lot of legal scholars go poo-poo, oh, no, it doesn't have the right pagination, doesn't have this, whatever. Again, I'm not talking about this is my one-stop shop, my one button that I push and I get whatever I want. I'm talking about building up a toolbox, okay? And this is just yet another tool that I put in my toolbox along with Fastcase and some of the other ones when I need to do legal research. And I'm not asking, one tool to do it all. I'm sometimes having to go to multiple tools just to make sure that I've got the amount of coverage that I really need to say, hey, I did the due diligence. I did as much searching as I possibly needed to do. So Google Scholar is an excellent resource. I'm assuming you're familiar with it, but if you're not, you should check it out. It also allows you to do medical research, and I don't want to take the time on it right now, but I will mention really briefly. If you are doing medical searching, a lot of times your medical searching is, doing background checks on expert witnesses. Well, this is a great resource to pull up free full text copies of medical journal articles or other science journal articles, because what they do, and let me just do a real quick search. I'm going to do an article search for sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time. Auditory hallucinations. Okay, that's a medical, obviously medical search. What they do is they pull out on the right-hand side a good source for a free copy of the journal article. Okay, so if you're looking for a free copy, they'll have it, for example, extracted or I guess highlighted on the side. Let's just pull up this one: auditory hallucinations, blah blah blah. They will point out here is a good place to get a free full text, a PDF or whatever of the article. Okay. And not only that, is they will pull together, let me go back here, all of the different versions that they know about on the web. So the results page for Google Scholar, it has a lot of moving parts on it. Whether it's the cited by or the all versions, if you pay attention, you can find some things on it that will be quite useful. So Google Scholar is great for legal research, but I point out the medical journal articles and the other journal articles as well to say, look, part of your legal research may be doing background checks on expert witnesses and pulling up his or her article. So this is one place that you can go to besides, say, PubMed and some of the other sources. So Google Scholar is a rich resource. It has a lot of different applications, very good applications for legal research. Okay, here's another great source for primary legal materials, but it's very, very quirky. It is public.resource.org, which is run by a guy named Carl Malamud, who's a very interesting guy. He's been described as a gadfly, and you will find articles about him all over the place. Here is an article from the New York Times in 2013 about catching up with him. Okay, here's one from Bloomberg from 2012, One Man's Quest to Make Information Free. He basically is trying to get as much of what he calls the operating system of the United States, its primary legal materials, scanned in and free to the public, because he said this is nuts that you have to pay for legal materials. It's the operating system of this country. Why is this, locked up behind a paywall? And so he has been trying to do a lot of different things as far as getting codes online and case law. He's got scans of old case law that he's getting in from West. He's got stuff that he's had sent to him by publishers. I think Fastcase even sent him some stuff. Anyway, he's got a very rich website. However, he needs an information architect to work on his site. I quite frankly get quite I get confused when I get into his website. It is rather confusing because it's lots of lists, and sometimes you don't know where you actually are when you're on his website. For example, here's one, bulk.resource.org, which is one of his websites. Okay, if you've ever worked on a Linux or Unix operating system, you should be at home here, because this is what the directory structure looks like. And when you get in here and you click on courts.gov, you can actually find all sorts of stuff. Here's cases from the Federal Reporter, and you could just get totally, here's Federal First. You can get lost in here, okay? So what good is having all this stuff, if you get lost? Well, I wouldn't give up on this website. One thing that you can do is this. You can go to Google, okay? And if you use the site operator, site::operator, the site limit, if you will, limiting to domain, with his website, it actually now suddenly becomes quite useful. I am going to pull up a citation that I had, and I'm never going to remember it, so pardon me for cheating, but I guess you will pardon me on that one. Here is I'm looking for a case, okay, from his website, and I searched by citation, okay, 906 F. 2nd 552. All right, and the important thing is the site::limit. You'll notice that I said public.resource.org at first, and then I went to bulk.resource.org and said, oh, I'm so confused. And now I'm using law.resource.org. That's the That's one of the problems with this website. It's hard for a layperson to come in and really make sense of it, but trust me on this one. If you ever want a scanned or a good copy of a case, a copy that's been gotten from some of the legal publishers, you can do this kind of query. You don't have to use a search by citation. You can actually put in some search terms if you're interested in. But the site colon limit that you want to apply is site:law.resource.org. And here is the case, okay, from 1990, all right, that he has on his website, all right. I like showing this one to be able to say to people, look, there are a lot of interesting websites out there with legal materials. You may not want to trust them. You may think they're a little weird, but this guy is really interested in getting the operating system, the primary legal materials of the United States up online. And if you know how to do things like use Google and the site colon limit, you can actually make his website quite easy to use rather than trying to do the whole drill down thing with him, which doesn't work well. And there you go, you get access to the cases that he has scanned in. So that's another one that I'd like to mention to you. Public.resource.org. Excellent content. The user interface not so much. Okay, our next site that we're going to consider is the Legal Information Institute from Cornell University. The LII was one of the first big legal sites back 15-ish years, perhaps more. Another one was FindLaw. There's others that I've forgotten. It's a shame, but I've forgotten over time. But LII was one of the first real big ones, and it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife for legal information. There's a lot of stuff you can get here. It's still primarily primary legal materials, but there's a good selection of them. You've got cases, you've got the U.S. Code, the CFR, and other sources. There is some secondary materials on the site. What I normally show when I go to the LII are the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, and also the U.S. Code. So I'll scroll down here. These are the resources. I'll open them up in different tabs. Let me just start with the U.S. Code. Their version of the code is somewhat comparable to the one from the U.S. House of Representatives website, and that URL is in the class materials. The U.S. House might be a little bit more up to date, but I think they're comparable in terms of date, close enough, if you will. The one thing that I really like about the LII's version of the U.S. Code is they have a table of popular names. Very often people come in to a website and they know the name of the act, but they don't know where it's codified, and it can be very confusing. I like the popular name table because you can come in and you pick your letter. Let's, for example, talk about the Clean Air Act. This is another instance, and there are many, where the Control F function in your browser really comes in handy, because at this point you don't have to really hunt and peck. You can just do Control F, Clean Air, and boom, there you are. You're able to go right into where it's codified and find more information about it. Okay, so that's one of the things I really like about the Cornell website, is the popular names table. The CFR is also a good version. It's probably comparable, I think, generally speaking, to the one from the FDSys site, which is the successor to the Government Printing Office's website, GPO Access. Though that URL is also in the class materials. It's comparable to it's comparable to that one, but I tend to use the eCFR, which is at most 2 days behind the current date, and that also is in the class materials. So the LII is a great website. I've often struggled with how much to show people. I think in this case, for this website, just pointing you to it and saying, law.cornell.edu, go there and poke around, or use Google to search it, which you can do with that site colon limit that I showed you in the previous segment. Just showing you the site exists and telling you it has a breadth of materials and leaving it up to you to find the stuff that you might be interested in is probably the best way to present this website. Okay, last but not least, we're going to talk about Hein Online. Hein Online has a nice mixture of primary and secondary materials, okay? But it is a subscription-based resource. And, I wrestle with how much of the subscription-based ones do I show in a video for people where I don't even know, what you have access to. But you know, sometimes you or your firm, more than likely your firm, has to bite the bullet and get some sort of subscription. Generally, people get Lexis and or Westlaw. But you know, there are other sources out there, and one of them is Hein. Hein is available through Jenkins, and so what I'm going to do is scroll down to, this is the list of databases, and click the Access button on Hein. As I said earlier, Hein has a nice mixture of primary and secondary materials. Let me scroll down the list of collections on the left-hand side very briefly. It's nothing more boring than some guy reading all the collections that are available, but just give you the highlights. I love on Hein the Federal Register and also the Code of Federal Regulations. They go back to the 1930s. I used to work at a federal library, and we had a whole wall of CFRs that we had to keep intact, paper, because if there was an issue, if we were going to sue someone for a violation, we had to have the reg in effect at the time in order to be able to, you know, properly sue the person, right? And those CFRs got stolen, and they got ripped up, and they got lost, and whatever. Now I would not have to deal with that. I'd have the CFR from Hein Online. Would make my life so much easier. I wouldn't have to run around the building chasing after people, demanding that they bring back the historical CFRs. They also have the U.S. Code. Okay, they have other materials that you might be interested in. For example, historical state statutes and historical state reports, especially the state statutes, historical ones. That's also same reason I mentioned to you earlier with the CFR. Great to have access to them. Now, and that's all for the most part primary materials. Now, in terms of secondary materials, they have, for example, they have the restatements of the law from ALI. Okay, the older restatements. They have the ABA journals. And they also have a Law Journal Library. These are all secondary materials, okay? And I'm going to show you the Law Journal Library very quickly. What's neat about Law Journal Library is that you can search keywords or even cases. So, for example, let's say there was an important case that you wanted to see if there was, you know, commentary on that particular case. You can search by citation. Okay, there we go. Thought that was never going to show up. You can see here as you scroll down on the sort of right-hand side, the journal coverage goes from the beginning of time, if you will. For example, like the ABA Journal, 1915, Volume 1, to the present. Now, the present is a squishy concept because sometimes the journals arrive at Hein and have to be processed. They're a little bit behind, or they get published once a year, and the date is, even though it says 2015, it doesn't get published till the end of the year or whatever. So you can never really be sure what exact year you're going to get. It's going to be as current as Hein can make it. And remember, they process all of these journals and make images of every page of content. They're TIFF images, tagged in line something something TIFF. But they create an image of every page of the document, whether it's a law review article or a CFR or whatever. So they do a lot of processing. It's quite interesting what they do. I'm going to do a quick search of the Law Journal Library for 384 US 436, and if you know what that is, good for you. You've been probably watching a lot of cop shows. This is the Miranda decision, and there are 58,000 and some change, almost 59,000 matches for 384 US 436. I could have searched it by a phrase, and in fact I think I will go back and modify my search and make it a phrase just to be a little bit more accurate there. I got a little sloppy. Here we're at the end of the video. I got a little sloppy. Search it as a phrase. Now we've dropped the number of hits down to 13,000 and some change. So these are law review articles mentioning this particular case, the Miranda opinion. So it's going to deal with all sorts of topics that are relevant to that. For example, Miranda at 40. You can see that second one, Miranda at 40, and other types of commentary on that. All right, so I'm going to pull up this one, and you can see that each of the pages are basically images of the way it was published, and you can work your way through the page. What's neat, through the article by navigating, going to page, for example, 162, which is a little boring because it takes a while for it to load, and you don't have a lot of screen real estate. Okay, this is a blank page. Wow, that was fascinating. Let me go down and just grab another page here. boom. You know, you can work your way through. I would say that it probably makes more sense to download the articles, and you click on that little Adobe Acrobat icon, and you can download all 42 pages as a PDF, and that makes a lot more sense. Okay. However, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about is if you and let me go back to the first page here. Was that 162? Yeah, I think it was. Anything that is available from Fastcase is highlighted, and maybe it was 161. And what you can do is click on it. In this case, we'll get the case from Hein. Hein has the material, but a lot of it is coming in from Fastcase. So here I am able to look at this particular case. Here is the text of the Miranda opinion as well. So there's a lot of good content in Hein Online, a nice mixture of primary and secondary. I think they do an excellent job with the user interface. No user interface is perfect, but theirs is about as good as it can be with all of the content that they offer. And again, it's a subscription site, but it's well worth getting a subscription to it because this is material you probably won't be able to get elsewhere easily for free on the web. Okay, I'm just going to take a minute to recap what we covered today. Now again, you know, I couldn't cover 14 websites, and believe me, you didn't want me to cover 14 websites in this video. It would be an hour and a half, and it would be just, you'd be asleep. But anyway, I covered what I felt were the top 5. And the top 5 are Fastcase, but especially if you can't get access to the desktop website, the free app. Google Scholar for obvious reasons. PublicResource.org, quirky, but also because you can Google it using /, very, very useful. Legal Information Institute, because it is basically a Swiss Army knife for legal research. And then Hein Online, because I think they do an excellent job just digitizing everything they get their hands on. So these are the top 5. Hopefully you got some takeaways from this video. And there you go. Good luck with your legal research career.